Good evening and welcome to Thursday Night Live. I'm Matt Edwards. I'm going to be doing a solo show tonight. If you don't know me, I am a voice teacher, a professor, an author of So You Want to Sing Rock and Roll. And I am, excited about talking about how the voice works. And I come on the show every Thursday night to answer questions from singers from around the world, usually joined by Mike Elson, who's not able to be here tonight. So we'll be doing the solo show. I'm going to try to keep an eye on the chat. So if you have questions as you're watching this evening, please go ahead and drop them down in the chat. And otherwise, we're going to go ahead and get started. And the first question we're going to begin with tonight is, how do you teach students to support? And this comes from Susan. So I thought we'd use Patty LeBone over here to kind of talk through what's happening when we're controlling respiration for singing. And then I'll tell you a little bit about how I teach this as well. So when we inhale, air comes through the mouth and it travels back over the hump of the tongue, and it comes down through the larynx and then down through the trachea and into the lungs. Now, the lungs are housed within the rib cage, and this is the rib cage that you can see here. Now, you can see the lung material up here and right here, and the lungs themselves are attached to the ribs through what's called a pleurosac. And now this is a thin liquid membrane. So the easiest way to describe this is, imagine taking like a Walmart bag and getting it wet, or any of those plastic bags that you would get from any kind of a retail store. And you put that up against a glass window. Because of that wetness, it will stick to the window. But you'll be able to grab a loose part of the bag and pull it around the window, and it will slide while staying stuck to the window. That's what the pleurosac does for the lungs. It helps attach it to the ribs, but then when the ribs move, it stays attached and it moves along with the ribs. And that's important because when we inhale, there's a group of muscles called the external intercostal muscles that contract and help lift our rib cage up. Now, each one of those muscles, it starts on the bottom edge of each rib and it inserts into the top edge of the rib below. And when it contracts, it pulls the lower rib towards the upper rib. Now, when that's happening, we have another muscle that gets involved, and that's the diaphragm. And the diaphragm is kind of hard to see on this model. If we remove the lungs, let's see here if this guy will pop out tonight. It's always a hit and miss. But this is the diaphragm right here. So the diaphragm actually runs along the bottom of the ribs, and then it connects to the bottom of the lungs right here. So when we inhale, the diaphragm contracts, and the diaphragm connects down. Yeah, it's going to be sticky tonight, I think. The diaphragm connects down into the thoracic vertebrae, and so when it contracts, it lowers, but it stays, attached to the ribs. Then when we begin to release the air, whether that's us making sound or whether that's us exhaling, what happens is the rib cage starts to come down, because as we let air out of the lungs, it's taking up less space inside of our torso, so the rib cage is going to collapse. The diaphragm is going to relax and it's going to come back towards its resting position. So first, that is the most basic, right? We have air that comes in, the rib cage helps lift up, the diaphragm contracts down. One other thing that's worth pointing out is that inside of the lungs, and it's really hard to see on cameras, this is a model. It's just trying to show you that there's all these little teeny dots. And those little teeny dots represent what are called alveoli. And the alveoli are tiny pouch-like sacs within the lungs that act like little rubber balloons. And you know that when you blow up a balloon, it expands, and then because it's made of that rubbery latex, it wants to collapse back in. If you let go at the top of the balloon, it'll just shrink immediately. Well, the alveoli are doing the same thing. They get expanded when we inhale, and then they want to collapse back in. We call it elastic recoil. And there's about 200 to 300 million of them inside of your lungs. And so all those tiny, tiny little balloons expand. And then as we release air, they're going to contract as well. So we have them trying to contract. The rib cage then comes down as we decrease the amount of air inside of our lungs, and the diaphragm returns to its resting position. Now, the other set of muscles that you often hear people talking about are the abdominal muscles, things like the rectus abdominis, the transverse obliques, right? We have all kinds of muscles that are running around our midsection, holding in what was known as the viscera. So the viscera is all of this, right? The liver, the stomach, the small and large intestines. All of that is housed in between your diaphragm and the bottom of your pelvis. And those muscles help hold all of that in. Now, when we inhale, what happens is the diaphragm descends and it displaces these organs. And we end up feeling that displacement of the organs pushing forward on our abdominal wall, sometimes off to the sides and sometimes off to the back. And then what a lot of singers do is they contract that abdominal wall to push and compress that viscera back in. Simultaneously, because those muscles attached to the bottom of the ribs, they're going to pull down on the rib cage, which is going to help push some of the air out of our lungs. And if we're contracting and pulling in the viscera, it's going to push it up into the diaphragm, and that will also help us expel air from the lungs. So once we understand the mechanics, we can start to manage what we're doing with our respiratory system when we sing. And the first step is just getting inhalation under control, making sure that those external intercostal muscles expand and that our lungs fill up with air. So what you're going to want to do is get your hands on your bottom ribs, like right around here. And we'll move this thing right here. So I'm putting my fingers down here on the bottom ribs. And right in this area is where the stomach muscles attach. And what we want to do is just get comfortable breathing in and keeping this muscle from engaging. Okay, because a lot of times what you'll see is that as someone breathes in, that muscle will try to tighten up right away, especially as they start to hiss out or they start to make a sound. We want to start training it to not do that. We want to let the natural recoil, or what we call passive force, take over. So you're going to get your fingers on the bottom of your ribs right there, and you're going to inhale in, and then we're going to hiss. And as we hiss, we want to keep this muscle out of the way. So that's it, contracting. So what's happening in this moment is I'm contracting my external intercostal muscles. Those are those muscles that help hold the rib cage up. And I'm trying to maintain expansion. And when I'm trying to maintain expansion in the rib cage, it also slows down the relaxation of the diaphragm, right? Because the diaphragm wants to relax up. And by slowing down how air is released from my lungs, it's going to reduce that upward pressure on the diaphragm. I'm also trying to relax the abdominal wall so I'm not using any contraction to try to accelerate airflow. So that's the first step. Then the second step after learning how to do that on a hiss is just learning how to do it on a pitch. So breathing in, keeping everything up, keeping the abdominal wall out of the picture. And just hold that pitch as long as you can. Just pick something comfortable. Now, as you hold out that pitch, what's going to happen at some point in time is that you're going to be going along with a certain volume level. You'll be on pitch, and you're going to notice either the pitch is going to start to sag or the volume level is going to start to sag, or both will start to sag at the same time. And what that tells us is that the air pressure and flow is decreasing enough that the vocal folds are starting to slow down a little bit, and we're starting to get the pitch falling, and they're not moving as far away from the midline, so the volume is falling as well. When that happens, we have to engage what's called active force. And active force comes from contraction of the abdominal wall. So when we reach that point where we feel like pitch or volume are starting to go down, we're going to slowly contract our abs as if we were doing a plank. And the reason we're going to do that plank idea is because when we try to plank, we're holding this all in, right? We're not doing like a crunch where we're kind of targeting specific muscles, but rather holding everything in firmly. And as we start to get that planking sensation, it's going to push the viscera towards the back. In the back, it's going to get blocked by a muscle called the quadratus lumborum. You can't see it in this model, but it's there. And as that viscera gets trapped in between those back muscles and the front muscles, it's going to put upward pressure on the diaphragm. And as I mentioned earlier, because the rectus abdominis and the transverse oblique muscles, they connect up here into the ribs. The bottom ribs is going to pull down on them as well. And that's going to send out a little extra air to get you the volume that you need and the pitch that you need. Okay? So I would start out like this. And then when I get to the point where I feel like everything's pulling down, I'm going to start to contract my abs. So I'm going to show you the whole series here. We're just going to pick an easy pitch. Just do a low pitch in the bottom of my range. We're going to feel that everything stays out at first. And then I pull in that plank positioning of the abdominal contraction to get to the end of the note or the phrase or whatever it is that I'm singing. So that's where I start, Susan, with teaching students how to support. I start there. And then the other thing is I make sure that they keep in mind that Support is going to vary in where you are in your range, what volume level you're trying to sing, and what register you're in. Okay? If you are trying to sing breathy, like a breathy pop ballad, you're not going to need to take a big breath. In fact, if you have too much air, it could actually get in the way. So then I just have students sing or breathe like they're speaking and not even try to engage all these muscles. If I have a student that's just singing little short phrases that are like one measure, two measures, all right, they don't need, again, all that air. They just need a little bit. So I just tell them to, think of just taking in a small breath, just let it out. That's enough. It's when we get to the more complex things, and especially like a big belty song by like Whitney Houston or Celine Dion, Adele, where you're really sustaining out notes, that's when we're going to start to use this technique that I just covered. If we're working with musical theater performers, that's when we're going to use this technique because they have a lot of long lines that they have to get through. And of course, classical singers and choral singers are going to need this approach as well. Okay? So that's the start of it. That's where you get going, and then you deal with the nuances along the way. Oh, the vocal folds. Let's touch on that as well. The vocal folds, when you're in head dominant production, there's a lot of air flowing through them compared to when we're in more of a belt production. And so when we are in that belt production, there's less air coming through than when we're in that breathy head. So when we are in the breathier quality, air is being released more quickly. We may have to engage the abs sooner. And when we are in that belt production, those vocal folds are holding the air back a little bit. So we're going to delay contracting the abs a lot of times because we've got more than enough air backed up underneath the vocal folds. And then when we, again, hear the pitch go down, the volume go down, is when we will want to contract to take that back up to the place where we started. So I hope that helps, Susan. If you have any more questions, send them in. Be happy to answer them. That kind of ties into this next question that came in from Isha, who says, how do I sing with more power like Adele and less flat? Well, Isha, go listen to everything I just said, because this is probably the first step for you is getting that respiratory system really engaged. Now, the thing that you're going to have to evaluate then when we're talking about power is whether or not your vocal folds are closing. Because a lot of times what will happen is that you'll be trying to belt out this, sound like this Adele sound, and you get that kind of a vocal quality. And that vocal quality lacks power, and it also tends to be flat. That comes because your vocal folds aren't closing as firmly as we would want them. So, Isha, this is what your larynx would look like. This is the trachea that's coming up. That's that tube that sends air down into our lungs. This is the cricoid cartilage, which helps connect the larynx to the trachea. This is the thyroid cartilage, which connects the vocal folds back to these guys, which are called the arytenoids. Okay, so the vocal folds are on the inside right there. And these arytenoids open up to let us inhale, and then they are pulled together to help us get our vocal folds to buzz, especially when we're singing a song by an artist like Adele, who's got all that belt power behind it. So there's muscles in there that we need to coordinate and strengthen, and we've typically called this chest register work, okay? So the first thing I want you to do is to make sure that you're able to close them firmly just by doing some staccato, by doing ha, 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 and taking that up by half steps. Ha, 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 ha. That's going to be training your body which muscles it needs to use to bring those vocal folds together. Now, after your body starts getting accustomed to what it's like to bring the folds together, we're then going to start to sing that in that position. So we would do the staccato followed by a sustained pitch. Ha, 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 ha. And then you just want to hold it nice and firm. It doesn't need to have vibrato. It can just be straight tone. And that is, again, then starting to take those awakened muscles and strengthen them and make them stronger. So eventually you're going to be able to carry up that closed sound higher in your range. The next step in the process is starting to move it a little bit. So we're going to do ha, 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 which is strengthening that closure, hold the closure, and now move pitch. Only take this up as far as is comfortable. If it starts getting yelly on you, then you definitely want to stop. Then the next thing you're going to want to do is trying to carry up that sound on a glide. So going ah. When we do that glide, the larynx is actually tilting. this thyroid cartilage that sits on top of the cricoid cartilage, it tilts. And as it tilts, it pulls your vocal folds longer. And as you see in this model, when the vocal folds get pulled longer, they want to fall apart a little bit. When you're doing these glides, you're training those muscles to hold the folds together and to move in pitch, to be extended and elongated without letting go. And so this is a really important skill that's going to be necessary to get the strength that you're looking for. Then comes the tricky work. And for this, I'm going to tell you, just for the sake of time this evening, I want you to go back into our archives and I want you to look for when we've talked about how to mix. Because what it sounds like to me is that you really then need to spend time after you've developed this chest register learning how to find variations of mix in the middle. Okay? And mix is learning basically how to use some of the more light qualities that our voice is capable of using or producing. And merging them with the heavy sounds our voice is producing. So that we find the middle ground, which is more like this. And then we can find all kinds of shades of that weight or the vocal fold vibration. And as we find those different shades, we're going to find qualities that work better for, one Adele song, maybe then another quality works better for a Christina song, another works better for an Ariana song. And then we can find what your voice really does the best and then start picking songs to match the vocal qualities that work best for you. Okay? So check that out. And, if you have a hard time finding the mix exercises, just let us know and we can point you in the right direction. And then the last question that's also kind of related to this is Phoenix. And Phoenix says, why does my voice sound flat every time I sing? So Phoenix, again, if you go back to the beginning of this, we were talking about when you start running out of air pressure, air flow, that the vocal folds aren't getting enough power because the respiratory system is considered the power source. If they're not getting enough power, then as you try to sing, the pitch can start to go down. So first thing I would do is go through all that breathing work and see if that helps. Second thing is I would be curious if you're maybe carrying up too much of the chest voice I was just talking about with Isha. Because if you are, especially into those high notes and going, and you're squeezing on it, it's going to go real flat. We got to instead learn how to mix up there as well for your voice so that way we're not carrying up too much chest. Because when you carry up too much chest, those vocal folds are just too thick and it's going to drag the sound down. Okay? The other things that I want you to check on is see if your tongue is trying to retract. So I want you to pick up a mirror, get a flashlight, look in your mouth. And if you see your tongue starting to pull back or lift up, that's tongue tension. And tongue tension can really wreak havoc on pitch. Okay? If you have your larynx and sound moving upwards and your tongue moving down, now your larynx is caught in the middle. And when your larynx is caught in the middle, it's going to be hard for that thyroid cartilage to tilt. It's going to be hard for air to release, and some of the air pressure can get directed back down at the top of your vocal folds, and all of those things can affect pitch. So I want you to check those. Then the other thing I want you to do is put your hands on the side of your neck, and I want you to go goog, 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 and then go ha, ha, ha. And I want you to alternate between that a few times. Goog, 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 ha, ha, ha. Goog, 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 ha, ha, ha. If you feel feelings like the goog, goog, goog when you're singing your song, that means that your constrictor muscles are engaging. The constrictor muscles line your vocal tract, and they're there for swallowing, but when we go to sing, sometimes they try to engage. And if they do, it will get in the way and cause pitch problems like you're talking about. So if that's the case, then I want you to go more for that laughing position and just laugh through your song. So whatever your melody is, you're just going to go ha, 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 ha. Whatever the melody, just laugh it through. Then sustain the laugh, ha, 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 and see if you can keep those constrictors out of the way. And as you do get them out of the way, you should see your pitch improve as well. So hopefully that helps. If any of those tips don't seem to help you, send us a video. We can take a listen to it and give you some feedback. All right. The next question we have is from Linda. Linda asks, please, how do I get my diction right when singing? So this is going to depend a lot on what style of music you're singing. If you're singing in a foreign language, German, Italian, or French, you're having to teach your body a completely different motor skill than it's been using in day-to-day life. So if it's your body's not used to that and it's trying to make this big jump, you're going to just have to give it time. It will get better and better, but you're going to have to really relearn how to move your tongue to make every little articulation necessary for that language. And so that's going to mean that if it's a D And that D is hard for you to make. You're literally just going to sit at home and slowly go through the actions of going, putting your tongue up behind the roof of your mouth, behind your upper teeth, and going D, 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 and slowly doing that until you get it right. Then when you get it right, start speeding it up and then trying to attach it to the vowels or whatever words you're working on. If you're working in music theater, we're usually going for just a neutral American speech. We're trying to make sure it doesn't have an accent. It sounds a lot like what you hear on TV. So in that instance, what you're going to want to do is listen to recordings of yourself singing and listen for any little diphthongs that you might be adding into the mix. That's where you warp a vowel. So if the word is my, you might be doing my, because technically I is an ah vowel and an e vowel. I, my. When we sing in musical theater, if it's a sustained pitch, we would hold the first vowel out. My. Then we'd add the second vowel at the end. If you come from, let's say, a southern state, I'm in Virginia, we tend to morph that in the middle of holding it out, so it becomes my. And that works really well for country music, for singer-songwriter stuff, for some rock stuff, but it doesn't fit music theater as well. So you would want to be listening for those diphthongs and triphthongs as well, and trying to figure out if maybe you're morphing in the middle of that. You're going to want to make sure that all of your consonants are clear. And if your consonants aren't clear, again, you're going to want to do some of the same work that I just mentioned for foreign language songs, and you're going to want to really figure out where that consonant needs to be produced, and you're going to want to drill it. And if you go over to my blog, it's edwardsvoice.blog. There are some tongue articulation exercises that would be really good for you, that will start getting your tongue bouncing in all the different places that are necessary for you to be able to improve the agility of your tongue. Now, if you're singing something else outside of that, more in the pop, rock, any commercial genre like that, gospel, R&B, hip hop, you name it, the diction is going to vary depending on the genre. So the first thing I would say is, before we worry about getting your diction right, what I would want to do is make sure what right even means. And to do that, we don't want to listen to just one artist. We want to listen to like 20, 30, 40 artists. And you're going to find out that in some genres, everybody does it different. In other genres, there seems to be some more commonalities amongst all of the different artists and whatever accent or vocal mannerisms they bring into each song. And then once we understand what those parameters are for that style, we can then start to do the work on improving your diction. And again, this is going to have a lot to do with agility of the tongue. Also, there's, you need to have agility in your mouth. You need to be open up your jaw without the master muscle engaging, without the muscles underneath of your jaw engaging. You need to be able to get your soft palate up. We need to make sure that your larynx isn't shooting up, because all of those things can get in the way. But if you start with the tongue drills, a lot of times that will start to loosen things up, get some of the other troubles out of the way, and it will help you get that diction to crisp up. So hopefully that helps. After we get done with the show tonight, I'll go ahead and I'll pop in the link for that blog article that I'm mentioning that has all those tongue drills in it. Go drill those, and I think you're going to see some improvement. All right. And since it is summer, we are doing a short show tonight. So if you have any questions you want to ask live, go ahead and pop them into the comments. I'm going to end with, I believe it's Bailey. Yep. And Bailey wrote in saying, I got a talent for rapping and singing. How do I get started without money? I want to be on American Idol or The Voice bad. So, lots of singers, Bailey, are in the same position. They're trying to get into music and they don't have the money that a lot of, these artists that they see on the YouTubes or whatever have. Well, there's no reason, though, you can't start on social media, especially on a platform like Instagram, TikTok, or even on YouTube, of just putting your stuff out there. Those are free venues. Now, there's trolls. So you're going to get people who are going to be nasty no matter what you do. You could be the greatest person in the world. They're still going to have something nasty to say. So you got to understand that as you get into this process of putting your voice out there. But if you really want to go in for The Voice or American Idol, you're going to be dealing with judges who sometimes can be kind of harsh as well. So what we do as artists have to develop a thick skin. How do you do that? When you start realizing that there are a lot of artists that you don't like either, right? I'm sure we could go through and start, flipping through a playlist and you say, oh, I hate that voice, or I don't like that song. And you would have people you don't like, right? That hasn't stopped them from producing music. So just because people don't like what you do doesn't mean you should stop doing what you do, right? We have this false misconception that we're supposed to please everybody or please a mass portion of the overall audience. But there's like 350 million people in this country. And if you please just 1% of that audience, that's 3.5 million people. And that is more than enough subscribers to keep your YouTube channel very productive, right? Helping you sell things, sell your songs when you get them out there, getting you plenty of views to get attention. So you only need 1 out of 100 people that comes across your music to like it. And once you start realizing that, you can start to then, be able to deal with those trolls a little bit easier, because you get that and you're like, you're one of 99 people who doesn't like me. I don't care. You're not my people. And the one person who's like, hey, I love that. That's great. Then interact with them. Be sure to pop on there and say something, and say thanks or, checking it out, whatever. Then go check out their content and see if there's anything you like of theirs. Okay. And then keep doing that every day. Make sure that you're responding to people who respond to your postings, and then go respond on other people's postings as well. You being a participant and giving shout outs and stuff to other people is going to help the algorithm see you as an active user, and it's going to be more likely to drive people to your content. And as you get them attracted to your content, you'll start getting ideas of what really hits and what doesn't. And then when you start noticing, that kind of content, that really clicks, then you can start producing more of that content. After a while, you're going to see where your shortcomings are. You might be getting a lot of people saying, oh man, you really need better beats, and then you can start going and looking for that. And then you know where you're going to spend that hard-earned money that you say, is hard to come by. And I get it. But, a lot of times people just go out and they'll buy everything. They'll buy the studio monitors, the microphone, the fanciest stuff they need, the Pro Tools, all that stuff, trying to make everything, top-notch straight off. But maybe that's not the stuff you actually need. Maybe you need to find a creative partner instead. That costs no money. And that's another thing that you can do on these social media platforms is reach out to people. If you see somebody who puts up a beat, and they say, like on TikTok, sometimes people put that and say, rap over this or do something over top of this. And you go and do it. You can stitch that video and you get to showcase that artist and put your own stuff out there. Then if they like it, they might ask you if you want to collaborate. And now you don't need any of that equipment. You got somebody else who's a master at that. You're the master at rapping and singing. You bring your skills together and you can put out something special. And through those collaborations, you're going to be more likely to find other people who are like-minded, who have some of the same goals as you. And then one day you're going to find somebody that you really click with, and then you can start spinning out your own material. And I'll tell you, those contracts for American Idol and The Voice are not great. In fact, some of the contracts, depending on what round you're in, and these things change all the time, but they have clauses in there that, like, if you're in the final, I think it is 6, and you don't win, they still own you, and you can't put out your own music for 3 years. So that would be a real shame for you to be on the verge of doing something incredible, and then you try to get on The Voice, you sign one of these contracts, and then you're shelved for 3 years, and you can't do anything. So actually, for a lot of artists, doing this process I'm telling you about, where you meet collaborators, is going to be way more useful to you than trying to just shoot into one of those TV shows. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in those shows in the background. There's a lot of producers telling you what you're going to do, telling you what kind of person they want you to, be on camera. It's not reality, right? They make you think it is, but I've had plenty of clients on reality TV shows, friends, other people I know. It's not reality, right? There's a lot of that stuff that's staged. So if you go do the work yourself and you cultivate your own artistry, you're working with your own collaborators, you're putting your music out that way, then you get to retain that control. You get to decide where you want to stream your music. You get to decide how often you want to stream it for free, or if you want to put it so people need to purchase it. You're going to be able to make all those decisions on your own. And you're going to be better off in the long term. So check that out. And along the way, Bailey, there are a lot of other things you need to know that I haven't even covered. But if you're on those social media platforms and you're doing what I said with following other creators and getting to know their work, you're going to start to get things, especially like on TikTok, on your FYP, they're going to start to show up and say, hey, here's number one, trick I wish I knew about producing vocals. And they're going to give you a great tip, right? So give them a follow, like that video, to give them a comment, and keep going back to their channel and checking it out. Make yourself a list of channels that you want to, check. And don't forget as well, on that front page of TikTok, you can either go For You, which are people you may not necessarily follow, Maybe that is the For You. Oh, and the following. I think there's a following at the top where you can go to those people who you have selected to follow. But anyways, go through those videos, get all those tips and tricks, and you'll start realizing some of the stuff that you might need to learn more about. And then as you start gaining that, entry information, the first thing that helps you realize, oh, I need to learn something about blank. Then you can go over to Google, start looking for other ways to learn about that. Go over to YouTube, start looking for other ways to learn about that. And then you may get to the point where you're like, I really need help. But you will have arrived to that decision to go find help that you are going to have to invest some money in. But you're going to come to that decision after doing the work and doing a lot of self-discovery and realizing the number one thing that's holding me back is I don't know how to blank. And for $400, I can learn that and I will be a better collaborator. Then you're spending your money where you're going to get the most return possible. Okay? Because it's all about return on investment, ROI. You don't want to just be pumping money into things that aren't actually going to pay you back at some point in time. You want to invest in things that are going to help accelerate your career over the long term. Okay? So Bailey, I hope that helps. And, just for everybody checking this out, it's hard to put yourself out there. It can be scary and stuff, but, give it a shot and, start small and don't expect it to grow overnight. Right? A lot of times people put in years and years before they really take off. Every once in a while, somebody gets lucky. But there's also, for every one person that gets lucky, there are a lot of other people who put in the work and are still quite successful. So thank you for tuning into the show tonight. That's it. It's summer vacation. Thought we'd keep it down here to about 30 minutes. If you haven't checked the show out before, we go live every Thursday night on YouTube and Facebook and Twitch, with a live Q&A or special guest that we bring onto the show. If you have questions that you would like us to answer, jump on over to one of those platforms, send us a message, and we will add it to our database. You can also go over into the voicelessons.com website and sign up for our email list. And once you're on that email list, you will get a notification on Monday of what show we're doing on Thursday. And if we're taking questions, there'll be a way for you to submit those right there from your email. So thanks again for checking this out. And I look forward to seeing you next week, Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.